You know, I do a lot of collaging, but sometimes I just get sick and tired of paper and I want to use something else. So I've come up with a way to use materials that are a little unorthodox. We're going to be using painted acetate and acrylic skin. So first up, we're going to make our acrylic skin. So what is an acrylic skin? Well, what it is essentially, you can see right here, is it's just acrylic paint that's dried into essentially a skin, and we're going to be making one that's transparent. So how do we start? So you just need a palette of some kind, something that's shiny and slick and that paint is going to come off of really easily. And then you need to use some kind of gel or medium that's really meant for acrylic paint and is also going to have that nice clear look. So I'm just going to spread some out here. Now this is sort of a Goldilocks thing. You don't want it too thin, you don't want it too thick. I'm just using a palette knife to kind of gently get this to go ahead and be in sort of an even layer. The medium that I'm using actually happens to be self-leveling, so even if I leave bumps, it doesn't matter, but you can use whatever you want, and even if it's not self-leveling, that can be really cool too. Now, before this dries, and you do have 48 hours, so there's no big rush, but before it dries, what I want to do is I want to start adding some color. There are a lot of ways to do this. So I'm going to use an acrylic ink first with a little dropper, and I can go ahead and just splat some color in there, okay? I can also do some more purposeful drawing. If I have anything that has a small tip that will allow me to draw, then I can do everything from very simple little dots, okay, something like this. And I think dots are powerful and interesting repeating motif. You can do lines, you can get very fancy, and you can do all sorts of things where you write or do scrolly things. It just depends how fine it is. You know, fine line tools are available at most art supply stores, and in fact, you can usually get them pretty easily and attach them to any paint. I like to include metallics in the mix and stuff like that, just lots of fun different options. You can also use any sort of thin down acrylics or anything like that and just go ahead and add those into the mix. And once you have all of this down, the fun isn't over, because then you can head into your kitchen and you can grab something simple like a bamboo skewer and you can just start to drag and create patterns right through there. This is almost like marbling or something like that. It just gives a really pretty effect. You can do swirls. You can transfer some of the paint that was on the skewer to other places, like maybe let's get some of that red and stick it inside. Ooh, the green. You can pull through things. You can just really have a lot of fun. Now, like I said, you're gonna wanna let that dry for about 48 hours. So I'm gonna put that aside and let that dry. And okay, we're gonna move on to making our acetate. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab a piece of acetate which is meant for wet adhesive. And what that means, which I think is kind of exciting, is I'm gonna be able to use watercolor with it. So all I'm gonna do is just go ahead and dip into my watercolor. Now watercolor is transparent. And the good news about that is that it means that because this is a clear sheet, I'm gonna be able to see through to the other side, which lends to a lot of different possibilities. So you can see I'm just going in here, lots of water, lots of color, but you're not limited to watercolor. And in fact, I like to mix my media. So I'm gonna go ahead now and I'm just gonna add in a little bit of acrylic ink, which has a sort of watercolor consistency, but tends to be a little more opaque. And how about a little bit of hot pink in there? So we're gonna go ahead and just droplet that in. And then of course I can use my brush to smush this around. I can go ahead and I can just use some more water to dilute anything that I don't want, but really letting it get messy and flow all over. I can even use scissors to just go ahead and draw into here, go back and get my skewer, whatever it is. But again, I'm gonna let that dry, probably I would say overnight, maybe a couple hours. So now let's get our materials together and talk about collage. So I have a skin right here, which has dried plenty of time, and all I do is get my finger under the edge there and sort of peel it right off, just like that, okay? Now, this is gonna cut really easily with scissors. Boom, just like that. And if you wanted, you could even cut it, you know, into a shape. If you wanted for some reason, you can cut out particular areas. This is basically like a plastic skin because essentially that's what acrylic is, okay? Now the exciting part about the acetate too is that, remember I said that this was going to be both transparent and slightly different on the two sides, but you can see how all that wetness translates once it dries. But if you use acrylic, which is more opaque, it's gonna be like this on one side and like this on the other, which I think is kind of exciting. So now all you have to do is build your collage, and you're gonna do this the same way you would if this were paper or fabric or anything else. You cut out the bits and the pieces that you like to juxtapose them together any way that makes sense to you. You just find the different colors and areas that you like, you know, snipping, cutting, you know, just auditioning things right like this. And if you look at the finished one, I simply pulled my pieces together with some gel medium. And now you've got dimension and flat, all sorts of cool stuff. So I hope you'll give paper a rest and try some other mediums for your next collage.